Hi, Pafidal, sorry. How is the weather in Melbourne now?
It was super cold today. It was raining in the morning, and it was about 4 degrees in the morning.
I heard that Melbourne has several seasons, season in a day. I don't know if it's true or not.
Sometimes.
How is the weather in Darwin, Pamos?
Oh no, it's very similar to Indonesia. So it's tropical at the moment. It's 30 degrees every day, and in the morning it might go down to 20 degrees.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's nice.
And does it have a time difference between Kupang and Darwin?
Only I think it's an hour and a half. So at the moment it's almost 3:30 p.m. now.
Oh, okay. It's not too bad.
Yeah.
But I think we have like 2 hours different from Melbourne.
Yeah.
From Kupang, if I count it from Kupang.
Yeah.
So Pafil almost like 4 p.m. By the time probably the session ended, and he's going to have a dinner with family.
Yeah, so Darwin is much more similar to Kupang than Melbourne. It's closer, it's similar weather, similar people, very different to Melbourne.
Halo Sobat Kiks, selamat datang di channel positif dan inspiratif Oke. Hampir semua pelajar di Indonesia pasti ingin mendapatkan beasiswa untuk melanjutkan pendidikan mereka, apalagi untuk berkuliah di luar negeri. Selain karena negaranya yang indah, mereka juga ingin tahu bagaimana rasanya berkuliah dengan sistem pendidikan yang ada di negara yang kalian ingin tuju. Benar bukan? Pertanyaannya adalah, apakah kalian berani meraih mimpi itu dengan melewati segelintir proses yang pastinya tidak semudah membalikkan telapak tangan? Inilah 7 beasiswa kuliah luar negeri fully funded yang paling diminati oleh Scholarship Hunter. Apakah kalian salah satunya? Sebelum kita lanjutkan, jangan lupa ya untuk subscribe channel Oke, karena subscribe itu free. Yang pertama adalah beasiswa LPDP, beasiswa yang paling banyak diincar oleh pelajar Indonesia. Sebelum itu, yuk mengenal apa sih LPDP itu? Lembaga Pengelolaan Dana Pendidikan atau yang disingkat LPDP merupakan lembaga yang bekerja di bawah pengawasan 3 kementerian, yaitu Kementerian Keuangan, Kemdikbud, dan Kemenak, yang menyediakan beasiswa untuk program Magister atau S2 dan program Doktor atau S3, baik dalam maupun luar negeri. Program Beasiswa Pendidikan Indonesia LPDP dibuka setiap tahun. Pada tahun 2019, terdapat 2 tahap yang mana pendaftaran tahap kedua telah ditutup 10 September lalu. Terdapat beberapa jenis beasiswa LPDP, yaitu beasiswa umum, beasiswa afirmasi, dan beasiswa targeted group. Beasiswa LPDP ini mencakup semua kebutuhan dari dana pendidikan hingga biaya pendukung lainnya, sehingga kita tidak perlu membayar apapun. Untuk persyaratan dan alurnya, kalian bisa membaca secara lengkap ya di web LPDP. Yang kedua,
Okay, everyone, thank you for those who have already joining us. Can you please rename your profile with your name and your institution so we can easily recognize you? Okay, if you're still coming with the name of your devices, such as Lenovo or other names, can you please rename it with your name, full name could be, and also your institution. That would be easier for us to address you in this platform.
Nah, bunda ko sa tanah cita hayungan.
Apa headset, Bang? Punya headset, punya headset.
Hi, Pak Ainu.
Selamat siang Ibu Rini.
Selamat siang.
Okay, everyone, if you're still not renaming your profile and also your institution, and please do so because we are going to start at 2 sharp. We only have 1 minute left. So once it's 2 sharp, then I'm going to kick it off because it's actually live on YouTube now in International Relations Office YouTube. So if you don't have subscribed it, please subscribe and also like and share to your friend. You can share the link as well to your friend if your friend unable to join the platform this afternoon. Okay, I think it's 2 sharp now, and I'm going to head off and kick off this session, this webinar today. I hope everyone can hear me clearly. Am I audible to everyone? Can I get a response from probably Dr. Moss? Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the international webinar, High Degree by Research, Master by Research, and Doctoral Studies. I would like to appreciate everyone who taking your time off from your busy schedule to join us in this webinar. And I'm Rennie, and I will be your moderator during this session. On behalf of the committee, I would like to extend a very special welcome to our keynote speakers who are here with us today. Dr. Simon Moss from Darwin. Hi, Dr. Simon.
Hello. Nice to be with you.
Nice to meet you, Dr. Simon. And also we have Pak Fidel from Melbourne. Hi, Pak Fidel. Hi, nice to meet you again, Pak Fidel, even though it's on screen.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Great.
Hi.
Thank you very much. Hello,
Yeah,
everyone.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Thanks very much for joining us today, and I hope you two are doing well in your country during with the outbreak of COVID-19. I'd like to welcome the Head of International Relations Office, Dr. Maria Lobo. Hi, Ibu, how are you?
Hi, I'm good.
Thank you, Ibu, for joining us today.
Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, Ibu, you are audible, and I can hear you clearly.
All right, good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ibu. As the event today initiated by International Relations Office Undana in collaboration with Charles Darwin University, I would like to warmly welcome the representatives of Charles Darwin University. Ibu Chita, are you here with us? Okay, if you're not here, I would like to also welcome Camilla Dixon from Global Engagement CDU. I think you're together with Ibu Chita. Hello and welcome. And also Dr. Karen Knight from Global Strategy and Advancement Executive Officer. Hello, Ibu Karen, and thank you so much for joining us today. And oh, Ibu Chita just coming in. And also I'd like to welcome Ibu Rini from ILF Global Bali. Hello, Ibu Rini. Thank you so much for joining us with the webinar today.
Thank you, Reni.
Thank you, Ibu. Thank you. I would like to welcome the participant from outside Kupang or even abroad whom I couldn't mention one by one. Thank you very much for your interest for today's topic, and thank you very much for joining this webinar. In a moment, we are going to listen to opening remarks by Dr. Maria Lobo. But first of all, I would like to remind you several points. So please turn off your videos and audio during the webinar. If you are suddenly disconnected from the session, then please kindly join again by tuning off your video and audio so it doesn't disturb this platform. All questions can only be directed to the chat room. So if you have questions for two speakers, then please kindly chat it. And the team behind the scene are going to collect it, and I'm going to read it for them. We are going to try to cover as much as we can as the time allowed us for 20-minute discussion session. However, if you have more questions or we could not cover your points, then you can directly send an email to both speakers, and they are happy to answer your questions. Don't forget as well to submit your attendance list or participation form that are going to be given nearly at the end of the session. It is very important for us to monitor your attendance and also issue an e-certificate for you. And today's webinar has been started to go live in the International Relations Office YouTube. So please share the link if your friends or colleagues are unable to join this platform. And let's pray that this webinar can run smoothly, and also it's going to be informative and useful for everyone. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Maria Lobo to deliver the opening remarks for us today. I hand it to you, Ibu.
Okay. Thank you, Ibu Reni. Once again, can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, Ibu, you're very audible. I can hear you clearly.
Thank you very much, Reni. Good afternoon to all of us. Good one, everyone. Good afternoon again. I hope we all in perfect condition, even though we are experiencing this challenging situation, yeah, the COVID-19 pandemic. I'd like once again to welcome our keynote speakers, Dr. Simon Moss, and then Fidel. Thank you all for being able to join us today. Simon is the Dean of Graduate Studies in Charles Darwin University. And then Fidel is actually our own colleague from the Department of Chemistry, Faculty of Science and Engineering, who is now doing his PhD degree in Melbourne University. I'd also like to welcome Undana's official, who may be able to attend this webinar, and CDU representatives. I know Bachita is here with us, and also Camila from the Global Engagement. Hi. And Dr. Karen Knight from the Global Strategy and Advancement Executive. Hi. Thank you all for joining us. Ibu Rini, from the Global ILF. Thank you all guys for attending this webinar. My very warm welcome also goes to all the participants of the webinar. I think in our registration, it was registered about 100 people, so more probably coming soon. I hope you all can benefit from the session you attend today. So, Dr. E. Vayan Mudita, the Vice Rector of Cooperations from Nusa Cendana University, was really keen to open this webinar officially, but unfortunately he got something else or some other commitments that's also quite important. That's why he sent his apology not being able to be with us today. So to all the participants of the webinar, you might have heard a quote says that a journey to 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So if pursuing degree in master's and PhD by research is actually a journey you want to make, then let's consider preparing application for the admission to your program is actually a first step you make. That's why Simon and Fidel are here to share with us, to help us, and shed us some lights on how to prepare strong applications for the degree. As the Dean of Graduate Studies in CDU, I believe that we all will get some important information we need for the application as well as the challenge you are going to face during your program. For that, I'd like to give sincere thanks and appreciation to Simon for making himself available for today's event. Since we all know, as the Dean, I know that you must have a lot of responsibilities. So thank you once again for Simon. Yeah, indeed, CDU, as a very close partner of Nusa Cendana University, has been a very good friend and very good neighbor for us. Yeah, these two universities have a long story in cooperations in the past, now, and we hope to go continuously in the future, whether it's in research, teaching and learning, or community services. In the very near future, we hope to have research collaborations on watershed on the boundary of Indonesia and Timor-Leste, located in Talau Loes, where from this project, we expect 2 PhD candidates applying in CDU. So we only hope things will go smoothly. As we all know now, pandemic has hit us quite hard till now. Thanks also goes to our own colleague, Fidel, Pak Fidel Niti. Thank you very much. Fidel will share with us what he has been through during his PhD candidacy, including how he managed to keep making progress in his program during this unfortunate situation. And to end my remark, I'd like to thank and acknowledge all the support the International Relations Office receives to make this webinar possible. So thank you to the support from the university, to CDU representative, particularly Mbak Cita for facilitating this event. Thank you, Mbak. To Ibu Noya for being our host today, and to all my beloved IRO staff. Thank you, Ibu Reni, Pak Kor, Devi, and Leah for working so hard to make this program possible. And on behalf of all of us who are present today, I officially open the webinar, and I wish you all a fruitful and enjoyable session. Thank you. Back to you, Reni. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu Maria. That's very great message. Am I still audible to everyone? Just making sure that I've got a good connection. Yeah. Before we move along to the next session, I just want to remind you once again that all your audio and video will be turned off except for the speakers and also the moderator. So please bear in mind on that point. Well, moving along to our next session, we are going to listen to our two speakers today about their knowledge, experience, and expertise in respective to the theme application preparation and study challenges during and post-COVID-19 pandemic. Let me briefly introduce our first speaker, Dr. Simon Moss. Dr. Simon is the Graduate Dean of Research, as well as an Associate Professor in Psychology at Charles Darwin University. He is a registered psychologist and endorsed in organizational psychology. He has published approximately 10 books and 80 peer-reviewed papers, primarily on how the policies and practices of organizations and governments affect the well-being, progress, and innovation of individuals. For example, he is the author of The Science of Management, Sustainable Coaching, The Negative Side of Positive Thinking, Where Should I Work, and Emotional Intelligence, Journey to the Source. And he also is the co-founder of CNIT Professional Development, a company that collated every scientific discovery that contradicts prevailing management beliefs and practice. So this is a short description about Dr. Moss. Now let us gladly welcome him. So Dr. Moss, I hand it to you now.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your very welcoming introduction. And so I probably gave you some of the information to read. So sorry it was so long, it wasn't supposed to be. I'm very honored to be here today. So let me firstly just share a screen. And hopefully in a moment, you'll be able to see just a heading. If you can't, then I've pushed the wrong button, but hopefully it's correct. Okay, so today I want to answer 4 main questions. And those questions are, let me just, who, what, which, and how. And let me be a little bit more precise because that doesn't mean anything. So who is eligible to enroll in a master's or PhD? What should you study? Which supervisors or universities should you choose? And how can you enroll successfully? So I'll discuss each of these questions in turn. So firstly, so who should enroll in the PhD or a master's by research? Well, actually, I think that everyone who is eligible, I believe, should enroll in a master's by research or a PhD. Now, you probably think that, of course, I'm going to say that because that's actually my role to promote PhDs and masters by research. But actually, I really believe it is helpful nowadays. And the reason is because in recent years, the world has been taken over by lots of automation, like robots and those sorts of things. And also there's so much change in the world, there's so much uncertainty. And it's in those environments that the old jobs are no longer as relevant. For example, employers, organisations are not seeking people who are just specialists in one field because the fields shift very quickly. But they're also not looking for people who don't have great knowledge in a field, like generalists, because you really need to have great knowledge to change and improve automation and to add something new, to be creative and innovative. So essentially, organisations and employers today are seeking someone with great specialist skills, but that they can easily shift to many areas. They're looking for someone who has great skills in sort of research and thinking and creativity and innovation, but with a specialisation. And a PhD or a Master's by Research really does fulfil that purpose and should be therefore very valuable in the years to come, even if you don't want to work at a university. So who is eligible for a PhD or a Master's by Research? Well, it's very complicated to work out who is eligible, and it does vary across universities in Australia and around the world. But generally speaking, most universities in Australia will admit people or prefer people who have completed a certain amount of research activity after their bachelor degree, like maybe in a postgraduate degree or in their work or something like that. And so I'm going to ask you, how many months of research activity do you think is necessary to be eligible for a PhD? Do you think it's 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months? Well, I'll tell you the answer. The answer is that you actually need, sorry, let me just go back one step. Well, it's too late now, but basically you need 6 months of research activity usually to be eligible for a PhD. So that may be, for example, you might have undertaken a master's degree where about 6 months, that is half of the year, was dedicated to completing a research project. If, however, you've completed some research activity at a postgraduate level or as part of your job, but not quite 6 months, say 3 months, then you might be eligible for a master's by research instead. But then, midway through your master's, you can upgrade to a PhD. That's something I can talk more about later. Now, what do I mean when I say you need to have undertaken some research? Well, usually this means research in a postgraduate degree, or maybe in your organisation, maybe as an academic or something similar. So it does mean sort of proper scholarly research. So obviously something like just researching the internet to find the best shoes is not regarded as research. So that's all I wanted to say about who should enrol or apply for a master's or a PhD. So what should you study? Well, obviously, to some degree, what you study will depend on your expertise, what you've studied before, and where you've worked before. But precisely which projects you should undertake is a very difficult question, of course, that I'm sure many of you have struggled with in the past. That is, how should you decide what your research should be? It's a very important question, of course, because you need to write a research proposal, like a summary or a plan of your research, before you enroll. So how can you decide what their research should be? So what I thought I'd do for the next few minutes is just describe some interesting insights on how to decide on the best research project for you. So for example, firstly, you should obviously think about a problem that you would really like to solve. Maybe a problem in your life, a problem in your community, or a problem in your society that is very important that you may have some interest in solving. But then, just to imagine a future where this problem has been solved. maybe imagine yourself 10 years in the future when the issue you want to address has been resolved. And the reason is that when people think about a positive future, when a problem has been solved, their creativity improves. They think about better and more original ideas, and they're more likely to identify an interesting research project. In addition, you should probably try to locate lots of very interesting research papers that are relevant to that problem and your research area. Specifically, I would recommend that you visit websites that summarize the most interesting, exciting, and original papers in your area. So, for example, you might visit this website here called Science Daily, which summarizes some interesting developments and advances in research in a whole range of different areas. Or you might visit the website called Reddit, that also will have discussion about particular research projects. And what I recommend is that you just very rapidly read or skim many of these articles that are relevant to your interests as quickly as possible, and then record some ideas or thoughts as you're reading. They don't have to be good thoughts, they don't have to be clever, but just any thoughts that come to mind. Because research suggests that when people skim lots of information very quickly, very rapidly, then their creativity improves. They are more likely to think of some original ideas that could be useful later. And then you might consider also searching for articles, not just in these websites, but in more scholarly databases like Google Scholar. And again, maybe skim many articles very quickly, and maybe rank the articles as to how useful or important they are. And then I would also recommend reading in depth, maybe 5 to 10 articles more than once. Ideally, you should read maybe 5 articles twice. And the reason being is that when we read an article more than once, we're more likely to develop very interesting insights than we would have otherwise. Often the first time we're a bit confused, and the second time it makes more sense. And so then hopefully after completing these tasks, you'll have a whole lot of little ideas and thoughts that you might want to consider as part of your research in the future. And one technique is then to sort these ideas into groups of similar ideas, because even that simple process itself of sorting your ideas into groups improves creativity. And you might also even decide to try to blend, that is, combine your 3 favorite papers. So find 3 articles, 3 studies that you really like, that you think could be interesting to you, and then see if you can find a way of combining that into one. And that tends to be a very good way of identifying research that you could undertake in the future. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say, just a few little ideas about how to maybe identify an appropriate research project. Right, so we've answered who is eligible, and we've answered what you should study. The next question is, where should you study a PhD or a master's? Which university should you choose, and so forth? Well, I think the most important question is actually to identify an appropriate supervisor first, and I'll talk about why later. So what I would recommend is maybe to visit the website of several possible universities that are not too far away. It might be Charles Darwin University, my university, it might be Melbourne University, Dell's University, or other universities that are quite close. Okay? And then to maybe try to find a supervisor with interests that are similar to yours. Okay? So I'll show you how to do that with CDU at Charles Darwin University, but it's very similar in other universities as well. In fact, you might even try to guess. So just to make it more interesting, All right, I'll show you. So what I have here is the main front web page for Charles Darwin University. Okay. So then you might guess, well, what would you click next to find out which supervisor? Well, actually, what you'd probably do, the most relevant click here, and most universities will have a connection to research. So you might push the research button here, and that'll generate another page. And so then which page? Well, normally you might find a page that is around PhDs or Masters by Research. Although in Australia, we tend to call PhDs and Masters by Research high degree by research. So that's the page you would click next, like this. And then which page would you now, or click, or which link would you click for a supervisor? Well, clearly you'd choose this link here called Find a Supervisor. So you choose that. And then you might choose an area that's relevant to you. So if you're interested in engineering, you might choose the engineering button. And then, like most universities, there'll be a list or pictures of various supervisors that you can choose. But the harder question is, well, how do you choose that person? Obviously, you want to choose someone whose interests are similar to yours. That's easy. But there might be 5, 10, or even more supervisors with interests similar to yours. So how do you choose? Well, I think the best way is to write an email to them and then to assess how they respond to you. So I have an example of a typical email that you might write. And these slides will be available later. So you're welcome to basically copy what I've written. So you'd say, hello, my name is whatever it is, so Simon. I'm working at, you mentioned maybe where you're working now, maybe Undana or any other university, and what your interests are. I'm interested in completing a PhD in the field of chemistry, for example. And then you might talk about a little bit about you, like I'm fascinated by a particular topic, but I really want to learn more about such and such. And then you just ask them, like, that you say, look, I understand you might be busy, but I'm wondering if you'd be interested in supervising, or would you recommend someone else? So a very simple email. So why are we writing this email? Well, actually, we're trying to test the supervisor. We want to assess whether they're a supervisor who is going to be supportive. So in particular, the best supervisors tend to demonstrate a quality called humility. That is, they admit to not knowing everything. Right? They're interested in your ideas. They want to learn from you. And they're interested in learning and exploring about the world, rather than imposing their ideas on you. Because otherwise they might not be open to your ideas and could be quite difficult to work with. Secondly, the best supervisors tend not to seem too rushed. So even though they might be very busy with lots of responsibilities, they still find time for people. Right? They're not always stressed. So they might respond quickly to your email, maybe within a couple of days, and they're happy to write longer answers rather than just one sentence. Because some supervisors just feel very rushed, they don't know how to manage their time well, and they may not be supportive enough to help you in your research. And finally, you want a supervisor who listens to you. That is, they recommend or offer suggestions that are relevant to your needs and interests, rather than just simply tell you what to do and impose their beliefs onto you. They listen to you, they accommodate you. They might realize, for example, that if you have children, they might recommend a school that is nearby that could be helpful. Or if you have health problems, they might recommend how to help. They seem to be sensitive to your needs rather than obsessed with their needs. And we find that these supervisors tend to be the best. Okay. So in some ways, it's probably more important to choose an appropriate supervisor than it is to choose an appropriate university. But nevertheless, which university should you choose? So for example, if this was the picture of 2 universities that you saw, which university would you choose? Would you choose the top picture or the bottom picture? Well, some people would choose the top picture. They'd want a more traditional university. And traditional universities are often more prestigious, so they might be more respected, and you might be more respected if you complete a degree there. But they're not always the most supportive or flexible. They can be, but they're often not. Whereas sometimes maybe a smaller university in the regions, maybe a little bit away from the city, can be more supportive because they're sort of more interested in individuals. They're not such big places. But on the other hand, they might not always have the resources or equipment you need, and they might feel a bit isolating to some people. So there are benefits and drawbacks for any university you go to. Just like there are benefits and drawbacks of living in a big city. It can be very exciting, but it can be more stressful, for example. So instead, there's probably other issues to consider. So firstly, you should make sure that your research interest aligns with what the priorities are of the university. Most universities will specify their major research priorities, the topics that they're really interested in, the issues or questions they really want to answer. There'll be somewhere on a web page where they specify their main priorities and interests. And if possible, you try to align your research with their interests. You're more likely to be accepted, you're more likely to receive funding, like a scholarship, and you're probably more likely to have other people, like other candidates, other students and researchers who can support you if your work is closely similar to the priorities of the university. And secondly, you should also check whether or not there are special scholarships that might be relevant to you. And I'll talk more about scholarships later. But so, for example, at Charles Darwin University and maybe some other universities as well, we have like special scholarships for international candidates whose interests align to Charles Darwin University. So there's just more scholarships that might be available. And I'll talk about some of those scholarships later. And then there are other considerations as well. So I think you should try to find a university that is around nature and trees and forests, because some evidence indicates that just being around nature and trees and the bush tends to increase well-being and restores energy. But there are many other considerations as well, of course. So, for example, you might also want to consider, what is the brand of the university? What is the focus of the university? So, for example, at Charles Darwin University, the PhD program very much focuses on humility and equality, treating everyone as important, listening to everyone, regardless of whether or not they're experienced or inexperienced, recognizing that everyone has strengths and insights, and everyone has weaknesses and difficulties and challenges as well. So, for example, I often try to live my life as a PhD candidate. For a while, I'll try to just live on the salary, the income of a PhD candidate, and I'll sit with the PhD candidates to really understand their experience so that we can really understand what it's like to complete a PhD at the university. We also sometimes organise events where the PhD candidates actually teach the researchers how to supervise. So they become the teachers for the day. The PhD students will teach staff how to supervise. So it's just an example of where we're trying to show how we really accept and embrace the ideas of candidates. But every university will have their own brand and style that you may or may not like. But ultimately, when making a decision, just trust your intuition. There's some studies that suggest that the best way of reaching a decision is to obviously read information about the various universities and supervisors, obviously seek some advice, but then to just ignore the decision for a few days, just relax for a while. And then after a while, you have a very strong feeling, a very strong hunch or intuition about which university is best for you. And some research suggests that that feeling, that intuition, while you're feeling relaxed, tends to be quite accurate, tends to be a good way of reaching decisions. So finally, I want to talk a little bit about how to apply for a PhD or Masters by Research. And again, it'll differ for every university, but in most universities, you want to find a page around higher degree by research, PhDs or Masters by Research. And then you'll normally find a click like here to apply for a higher degree by research. And then you'll be asked to provide a lot of information. And it can be quite time consuming, but fortunately most universities are similar. So once you've sort of applied for one university, it's usually quite quick to apply for another university. Usually you have to provide information about your academic record, of course, maybe any papers you've published. You might need to provide an abstract. You might need to provide some details about yourself, like your citizenship. You might need a certified copy for that. So it can be a while to organize the paperwork that's required. But probably most difficult is that you need to also write a research proposal. And in a moment, I'll talk about how to write a research proposal most effectively. But a research proposal will basically specify a purpose of what you want to undertake, a small literature review to justify the importance of this aim or purpose, and then a small method about what you want to undertake, as well as maybe some other issues or complications or risks. So to help you, there's a page here, and you can see there's a link on the top. So you can find this link later when I send out the slides, that provides a whole lot of information that can help you write a research proposal, whether you're applying for Charles Darwin University or any university, either in Australia or even around the world. So for example, this page will provide some information about how to write most effectively. So there's a section here on how to write. Because it's very important to be able to write very persuasively. And there's a lot of recommendations on how to write persuasively in English. So for example, on the top of this slide, I have a sentence that says, "It is known that smiling improves health." An interesting question is, can you improve that sentence? Is there anything wrong with that sentence? Well, there's nothing actually wrong with the sentence, but it's not particularly effective for a few reasons. One is that it uses a very vague term, the term it or IT. Whenever someone uses the word IT, it's often quite vague. And when something's vague, the reader doesn't understand it as quickly, and so they're not likely to be as convinced by what you're writing. So rather than "it is known that smiling improves health," the sentence could have been something like, "Researchers have shown that smiling improves health," or something more specific, something more concrete. Similarly, with the next sentence, it says, "This has been shown many times," is also vague. It should always be a word after this, that is a noun, an object, after the word this. It could be, "This finding has been shown many times," or "This pattern has been shown many times." And so there's a whole series of recommendations on how to write effectively that are available from this website. Although I should say it's actually not working at the moment, but hopefully I'll fix it tomorrow. And then there's also a whole lot of information here around scholarships, funding and budgets. So I don't know if I've got this page, but if you click on the top, scholarships, funding and budgets, there'll be information about scholarships. So it'll go to a page like here, and there'll be information about different types of scholarships and some advice on how to achieve those scholarships. So usually for a PhD, there are three main categories of scholarships. There are scholarships from Indonesia itself, which you might be able to organise. It might be, there was sometimes scholarships from the Ministry of Religious Affairs. In the past, there were Dicty scholarships, LPDP, and there were other scholarships that you might have been aware of. National scholarships or sometimes local scholarships. Then the universities themselves can offer scholarships, and they're called RTP. You don't need to know what that is, but they're often called RTP scholarships. Or universities might have other scholarships that they can offer. And I mentioned before that the CDU now have a scholarship called CDIPS, which I talked about before. And finally, the Australian government also offers scholarships to students around the world to study in Australia. And some of them are applicable for PhD, and they may be possible too. And so there's a document here, just on the bottom here of this slide, called How to Apply to Receive an Australian Award Scholarship. And so if you click on that link, there'll be some advice about how to receive that scholarship in particular. Okay. So I think that's all I wanted to say at this stage. And I'm happy to open up to questions. I'm not too sure how you wanted to organise that, whether you wanted questions now or later. But I'll obviously be here until the rest of the session and respond to any questions in the chat room.
Thank you very much, Dr. Simon Moss. The question and answer session will open later after the second speaker. So I've noted down several questions for you, and I will read it out later after Pak Fidel talk. Okay, thank you very much. It's very a great talk today, and I get again so much useful information for my future, further study in the future. Next, we're gonna hear our second speaker, Pak Fidel Niti. But before he talks, I would like to describe about him a little bit. So Pak Fidel is actually a lecturer of chemistry department of Nusa Cendana University, and he is an Australia Awards alumni. He pursued his master by research in the University of Melbourne, and currently he is doing PhD at the same at the field of chemistry too in the same institution, which is University of Melbourne, since 2016. And he is the awardee of Indonesia Endowment Fund for Education Scholarship. And his PhD research about development of smart passive sampling device for monitoring of heavy metal contaminants in aquatic system. Pak Fidel has a very outstanding work for the past 10 years in chemistry. Besides teaching, he also conducts community service, several research and publication in international reputation journals, as well as being presenter in international conference. So most of his work actually covers the area of chemistry and environment. So let's hear from Pak Fidel. We gladly would like to welcome you. I hand it to you.
Thanks for the very kind introduction, Ibrani. So I'll just start sharing screen. This one. Okay, so I'll first like to thank the head of International Relations Office of Undana, Ibu Dr. Maria Lobo, and team for having me in this wonderful webinar. And I'm glad and I'm very honored to be in this webinar to share my experience with the participants who may be at the stage of applying for a higher degree by research, including a Master of Philosophy or PhD, or those of you who are doing at your study at the moment. So the topic today is higher degree by research, sharing experience from a student's perspective. So it is actually quite a bit challenging talking about this topic because I myself haven't finished my PhD at the moment. So whatever I'm sharing today is basically based on my personal experience, but it will not be applied for those of you who are going to apply for PhD or Master of Philosophy, but it will also apply for me as a reminder so that I will finish my PhD as soon as possible. So yeah, I'll start. So high degree by research. So what is actually high degree by research? So high degree by research is actually different from our undergraduate research because it does not involve teaching classes. So it is basically a postgraduate university degree which can be obtained by doing a supervised research project. So basically the main requirement for one to obtain this degree is by doing your own project, which is supervised by typically 2 or 3 supervisors in your research area. And at the end, you'll have to write it as a thesis, which to some extent has to meet the requirement of the university and hand it to the university before being awarded the degree. So high degree by research basically involves not only a Doctor of Philosophy, but also Master by Research or sometimes known as Master of Philosophy. So as you might be aware that before starting a degree, one has to go through a number of application process, and you know that a lot of documentation has to be provided. But in this case, I will just point out 2 main factors, which I think are the most important factors to be considered before starting a higher research by a higher degree by research, which is a supervisors and a research topic. So we need to be really carefully when selecting supervisors, because we need to select someone who has, as mentioned before by Dr. Simon, we need to select someone who has expertise at our research interest, and we need to select someone who is willing to supervise a student. And on top of that, we need to select someone who can challenge us to be the best of ourselves during our study. And there's a saying that during our study, only 2 that knows when exactly we are going to finish our study. The first is God, so the second is our supervisors. So we have to be aware that we are selecting someone who has the authority which is approximately close to God in terms of finishing our study. So we need to be really careful when selecting supervisors. The second one is a research topic. So this has been mentioned by Dr. Simon before as well. So this needs to be aligned with the supervisor's expertise. The second one is we have to choose a research topic that not only we are good at it, but we have to have a passion and interest on it, because at some point during your study, you will feel that you know nothing. You start to doubt yourself whether you can finish your PhD, and it is only that your passion and your interest that will drive you through your study. So I'll talk mostly about a PhD because at the moment I'm doing a PhD, but this will basically apply as well for a Master of Philosophy or Master by Research. So, okay, so what basically does a PhD student do? So there are a lot of tasks that a PhD student do on a regular basis, day to day for about 3 to 5 years, but I can make a summary of the task of a PhD student can do during his study, which include research, reading articles, writing thesis or paper, publishing papers, or presenting in a conference. I'll walk you through each one of these shortly. So first of all is doing research. Basically, we have to do something new and original. So by doing this, we have to contribute to the existing body of knowledge. So it will not be a repetition of work done by others. And because it is something really new and original, we will have to be realistic and flexible. If it something that we expected in the beginning doesn't turn out to be the reality that we see during our study, we'll have to be realistic. We'll have to accept that. We'll have to be flexible to change into something that that might work for our study. This is basically because I'm depending on laboratory work for my study. This is basically what I'm doing during my study. And there's a very nice advice, which I screenshotted from someone's Twitter account, which says that as a PhD student, we are adding to the body of research, which means that we are adding a grain of sand to a beach and not aiming to win a Nobel Prize. This is what I mean by being realistic. So we are not, we are just adding a grain of sand to the beach, so you can imagine. So we are not going to save the world by our invention, or we are not going to win a Nobel Prize by our thesis. We'll have to be realistic. So this is a perfect illustration for what I mentioned before. So the big one here is the existing body of knowledge. So the one in the middle here.
Anak Melbourne Uni. Lagi PhD
so
di Melbourne Uni. Dosen Undana.
The one in the middle here is
part of.
The one in the middle here is our existing knowledge, and this is our learning development during our study, and this one tiny bit here is what we contribute to the existing body of knowledge. Next, reading and writing. This is two important tasks that a PhD student has to undertake during his study, and we can't avoid this. And as we know that these two are really challenging, especially writing for an international student studying at an English-speaking country. Writing is a very challenging task, but we'll have to do this too during our study. And especially reading, we'll have to do it on a regular basis, because we'll have to keep updated with the literature. And we don't want to end up doing something that someone else has published it in the literature. So we'll have to keep updated. But the problem is sometimes we enjoying downloading articles, collecting, and sometimes we read too many articles, which takes our time during our study. And the problem with writing is sometimes someone feel that we'll start writing when we are really ready, but in fact we will never be ready to write. So we'll have to take time and write. So there are two options: being writing or snack writing. So being writing, where you will wait for an opportunity and inspiration to come, and when you have a wide amount of time to start writing, or snack writing, where you set a regular time on a daily basis to start writing. And snack writing is very helpful for us doing a PhD study. And above all, we'll have to write and sew as we go. Apart from that, one more thing that a PhD student can do during his study is publishing papers. But this is not the requirement for publishing papers during PhD varies between universities. Depending on the university, at one university, they require you to publish, for example, 3 papers to be able to submit your thesis. Some others will not require you to publish papers during your study. But I find out that this is very important, and it can give you the opportunity to improve your writing skills, because you're not only getting the review from your supervisors, but also you're getting the review from the reviewer of the journal, and you get used to the publishing cycles, which is very important. And by publishing your papers, you're actually engaging to a broader community. And on top of that, you simplify the finalization of your thesis, especially if you're aiming for submitting a thesis by publication. Sorry. I was very lucky to have my first paper from my PhD published at the end of my 2nd year, and another paper published on my 3rd year from the collaboration with a professor from Indonesia. Other tasks that a PhD student can do is attending conference. By attending conference, we get the chance to communicate our research to a broader audience. And don't forget that when attending conference, there will be many others attendant from different expertise, and we can get feedback from a lot of experts, which will save which probably can save the future of our research. And don't forget that they can become the potential collaborator for during or after our PhD. And one more thing which we have to enjoy is the conference dinner. Apart from the task that I mentioned before, there are a number of things that a PhD students can do during his study, which is to work or supervise undergraduate students or organize a seminar, conference, or meeting, or collaborate with researcher or practitioner from other institution. And I was so fortunate to be able to be involved in some of these tasks. As things, the expectation and reality is not always similar. What we expect for in the beginning does not really turn out to be the reality that we see during our study. 2020 has been a proof for that. We never know that COVID-19 strike in the beginning of 2020, and all of a sudden, all our plan we have to modify all our plan. And in the beginning, we might think that our PhD path will be a flat line, but in fact, it won't be. There will always be ups and downs. There will always be ups and downs, and there will always be challenges during our study, which will shape our emotional state during our study. And these slides here illustrate perfectly an emotional stage of a PhD student during our study. In the beginning, most PhD students start with a very happy state. We think in the beginning that we will do our project very smoothly. We can publish a paper once a year probably, and we can publish 3 papers in 3 years, and yeah, we can submit our thesis on time. But this is not always the case. In the beginning, this step is known as uninformed optimism. We are very optimistic in the beginning, but we are not very well informed. As we are faced by challenges, the line will start getting down. We're facing tons of challenges. We face millions of failed experiments. For example, the line is getting down. We are getting we are being pessimistic. At this time, we are very well informed, and we know that doing a PhD is not an easy task. It takes a lot of efforts. It takes a lot of millions failed experiment. It takes a lot of time. And at this stage, this is known as an informed pessimism. We are being pessimistic, but at the same time, we are being very well informed. As we keep facing a lot of challenges, the line will keep going down, and at some stage we are experiencing a crisis of meaning, and this stage is very crucial. And if possible, we should seek help at this point. But if we keep working on it, we will find out that something start working, and we'll find out that we can fix problem. We'll get used to challenges, fixing challenges, and then at this time we started to believe in ourselves, and then the line will climb up, and we will be very well informed, and we will be being optimistic. And at the end, we think that after spending 2 or 3 years, now it's the time to finish our study. This graph might be different from person to person, but trust me that there is no PhD students that is on his peak or her peak throughout the whole 3 to 5 years of their study, as it is perfectly said by Danny Beck here, that no PhD student has all 5: good mental health, money, work-life balance, parents that understand what they're research for, and one last thing is an exciting love life. So this is basically the challenges that we face during our study. So for example, for me, who depend a lot on a lab-based experiment, I face a lot of millions. I face millions failed experiment, which on a regular basis, on a day, on almost every day. And I'm getting used to this as time goes by. And there are also challenges, for example, delayed in receiving chemicals or broken equipment, which will take the technician to come to fix the equipment. And on top of that, we'll have to balance our academic life, family life, and social life. We also fight with our mental health, procrastination, and imposter syndrome. We start to doubt ourselves whether we fit into the community of a PhD, whether we deserve a PhD or not. And on top of that, when COVID-19 strike, there will be a lot more a challenge to face. For example, in the beginning of this year, we faced a complete closure of the university, and we got no access at all to the laboratory for almost 3 months. And yes, we have delayed in completing some of the specific experiments, and some of our friends has to take leave, for example, for 2 to 3 months. And for me, for example, I have to extend my study scholarship, and I have to ask for the extension of the tuition fee from the scholarship provider. But above all, there's always something that we can do during this unfortunate time. For example, we can still do weekly Zoom meeting with the supervisor and lab members just to say hi and keep them updated with what we are doing. And also, for me, I was very lucky because I was at the end of my the end of my 4th year, and I got my risk assessment for my field experiment accepted by the time the university closed. So I was able to do to complete my field experiment. But there are also things that we can do during COVID-19, for example, analyzing data or writing paper or our thesis, or we can do some other things like doing progress review meeting with our supervisors or committee. For me, I was able to present my research progress to some of the collaborators outside university, for example, from Melbourne Water. One last thing that has to be that someone that plan to do a PhD or Master of Philosophy has to consider is maintaining mental health. Mental health is as important as physical health, so we'll have to maintain our mental health. We don't come here just for the sake of PhD. We have a life to live as well. So we'll have to take a leave at least once a year. Forget about the science, forget about the millions of failed experiments, forget about the papers, and live a life, enjoy our life. And we'll have to have us at least a supporting system, someone who can listen to us during our ups and downs. And I found out that doing sport is something that can help. And for sure, we'll have to have a life outside a PhD as well. So this is some of the examples of life outside PhD. For example, this is we perform dancing after Indonesian independence celebration in the middle of Melbourne City. And then we do practicing badminton once a week. We even attended a tournament, and here we are. We won the tournament. This is something that can make us happy even just for a minute or two. That's fine. And I was so fortunate that this little creator was born at the end of the 3rd year. So here we are in Sydney celebrating his first birthday, playing with him in the park. And yeah, I was getting together with my group members, celebrating end of year party and Christmas party, and yeah, that kind of stuff that will help us during our study. And as a final message, I will have to accept it that doing a PhD or master research is hard. So we'll have to work hard for it, set target and timeline, and write as we go. And we'll have to maintain relationship with supervisors and maintaining mental health. And for sure, we'll have to have a life outside PhD as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pak Fidel. It's a very great presentation about your experience and also your knowledge about this doing PhD in Melbourne. I know it's very challenging for you to do it, especially in this pandemic situation. All right, Dr. Simon, I hope you are still with us. Yeah, I'm going to open a Q&A session now, and I have already had 4 questions. I'm going to read the questions from the first person, from Bambang. He is coming from Northern University of Malaysia. The question is specifically directed to Dr. Moss. How does your view in relation to academic background linearity? For example, somebody hold a biology degree, then continue to master a law, then PhD of psychology. Is this relevant or can it be a problem? Please advise. And also this, or you would like to answer the question straight away?
Oh no, I'm happy to answer.
No, it's okay. You can answer this with the question first, and then I'll go to the second question because it's a bit long one.
Yeah, it might be easier that way. And I'm happy for anyone else to want to answer. Del, Maria, you might want to answer as well. So the question basically is, is it reasonable to change fields, from maybe biology to law to psychology across your degree? What are the implications of that? What are the effects of that? And I think the answer, in short, I think it's great to be able to change fields occasionally because employees often like people with a broad range of experience because they can integrate unique perspectives, different ways of doing things to create an original creative solution. So generally speaking, it's very good if you can have completed a range of different degrees, but there are of course complications. So firstly, if you want to enroll in a PhD, you really need to show that you've developed expertise in that field, of course. You're not going to learn the specialization particularly well. So if you want to undertake a PhD in psychology, you obviously need to show that you have the minimum psychology knowledge that's required for the PhD. That might be by completing another degree or by work or whatever. But as long as you can show that you've got the knowledge needed for a particular PhD, then I think organisations like someone with a broader range of expertise, particularly if they can utilise and integrate that in some way, although that's not always easy. So yeah, I think that's probably all I can say because in some ways the answer to that question depends on the circumstances and varies across fields. But it's, and I think the question highlighted both the tension between, on the one hand, the importance of having a lot of breadth and diversity, and on the other hand, showing you have specialist knowledge. In some ways, you need to have both, and they're not easy to combine.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Moss. Our next question, I'll take turn. This is for Fidel from Karina Handayani. If we do not have any research experience, for example, bachelor degree without thesis and master by coursework, can we still apply for a PhD? If we wrote an article, would it be considered?
Is it for me?
Yes, is it for you? Do you get the question, Fidel?
Is it about research background or something?
Yeah, I'll repeat the question. If we do not have any research experience, for example, like you don't have you don't do the thesis in bachelor degree and master by coursework, and you only have master by coursework, can you still apply for a PhD? And if we wrote an article, would it be considered?
Okay, that's a great question. I think most of the university require at least 25% like research credit from your previous degree, at least like 25% out of your credit from your master or your bachelor, for example, to be able to apply for PhD. But I think if you have a publication in the area that you're in your research interest area, I think that still counts. I think they can consider it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I do agree with that. But yeah, I suppose as you're saying, they want to see that you've completed something like 6 months of research at a postgraduate level, whether that's at a master's, an honours degree, or whatever it might be. And as Karina mentioned, if you haven't completed that, but you have publications, that can be equivalent, except the fact that people know there are other ways of writing articles. So, for example, it's not as strict. Like, you might publish an article, but actually someone else wrote a lot of it. It's not monitored as clearly. So universities might prefer someone who has written maybe 2 articles, for example. In other words, they might sort of feel that you need to write more than, or publish more than 1 article to be equivalent to something like an honours or a master's by coursework. So it is possible that sometimes the universities will be a bit more careful.
Okay, thank you, Pak Fidel, and also Dr. Moss. Now we have more questions. If we have to choose which type of supervisor would benefit the research student the most, a very good reputation in research supervisor, or maybe just a rising star supervisor? Please, your advice for the advantages and drawbacks, Dr. Simon. This is from Ibu Maria Lobo from Undana.
Yeah, it's a very good question. Well, look, let me tell you what I think the ideal supervisor is, and then I'll use that to answer this question. So I think an ideal supervisor definitely has very strong research skills, there's no doubt, because there are supervisors whose research experience is not quite extensive enough to really help candidates with unexpected problems. But sometimes the best researchers, particularly the young stars, the people who are achieving amazing goals at a very young age, they're almost too obsessed with their research to have time for the candidates. So in those circumstances, when you have a star researcher, that is either a young star or a very experienced star, you then want to make sure there's someone else involved, a co-supervisor, like another associate supervisor, who can be very helpful and who also has the trust of the star researcher. Because what can happen is you have someone who is a very respected, prestigious researcher. They don't have time. They delegate the research supervision to someone else, but that other person doesn't have enough power to make decisions. And that can be a problem. So if you do have someone who is a very experienced, prestigious researcher, make sure there's someone else involved, another supervisor, who still has a lot of respect and power to make important decisions as well.
Okay, thank you. Next question is from Pak Mexianis sendiri to Pak Fidel. How do you approach your supervisor if you do not meet for, let's say, a month or 2?
Thanks for that question. I was so fortunate to have a supervisor that can be approached anytime if he's around. So you can just write him an email, or you can just go and door knock and then meet him anytime if he's around campus. But if he's not, you can do WhatsApp call or Zoom meeting or whatever that you can do, or you can just email. But if a supervisor that you can't meet for a month or 2, my suggestion is just set a regular meeting in the beginning. So for example, once a week or twice, once a week or once in 2 weeks. So we will keep going like that. Yeah, to maintain the relationship or to maintain the meeting with your supervisors. Yeah, something like that.
Okay. Right, we have more questions that's coming from 3 different people, from Odi, Selan, Sikamaru Nara, and also Theodore Bole. But they're quite similar to each other, so I would like to just make a summary. So how do you maintain the good relationship between you and your supervisor, especially from you coming from a different background or different culture. Maybe both speaker can answer the questions.
Okay, well, look, I can start. It's a very good question. There isn't obviously a simple answer, but I'll give you a few guidelines. So firstly, I think it's really worth being honest with your supervisor about your doubts and anything you're anxious about or not good at. But you should be open. You don't want to spend too much time talking about your weaknesses and difficulties, but you should still admit if you're not confident in a particular area or you want more support on a specific topic, you should be open. And supervisors, I think, like to help. And if they feel they can help and they understand you, they're more likely to accommodate you. Sometimes when they're busy, they really just forget that you're a person with needs. So if you express your needs, they're often more likely to help. And secondly, I think it's worth sometimes asking your supervisor questions to understand how they like to work. So you might ask them questions like, look, how often do you want to meet? Like, would you rather many short meetings or some longer meetings? Do you rather like me email you with specific questions, or would you rather me sort of integrate all my questions into one email? These are questions you can ask people about how they like to work. You can even ask questions like, do you like me to challenge your ideas and that sort of thing? Because sometimes, and this is particularly true for candidates from Indonesia or even in Malaysia as well, is that they don't necessarily feel that they should be challenging their supervisor. They like to think of the supervisor as the expert, but some supervisors really want you to challenge them and question them, as long as it's something they've agreed to. So having a conversation around this issue can be quite important too.
What about your opinion, Fidel?
From my side, I'll set time on a regular basis to meet my supervisors, and for sure I'll be on time to the meeting, and I'll take notes of what we discussed, and I'll send it straight away, and I'll send my plan as well straight after the discussion, so he won't forget. So next time when you're discussing, you have something to prove that, kind of something like that.
Okay, right. So the point about how to maintain relationship, basically what I can grasp is you need to build up communication effectively with your supervisor, and you have to set up your own plan and strategy how you're gonna meet up with your supervisor, so you're not like missed out for anything else. I still have question from Ibu Maria, directed to Pak Simon, but Pak Fidel also can answer it, because I seen from the presentation that you've been through hard time in this COVID-19 situation. So what has COVID-19 pandemic affected the international students in CDU, but probably apply in Melbourne? And how will the coming semester be conducted, online or offline? This is very important for our potential master and PhD student who may be interested in applying for PhD in both of your institutions.
Yeah, actually, could I answer that? Because it's also very similar to the final question at the moment, a WADS question too, around how we're going to cater for COVID at this time. Now, because I have heard how universities are trying to accommodate this situation. Some universities actually are thinking about deferring, not taking on students, not taking on candidates until the borders are open, which of course may be quite a while away, 6 months, a year, maybe long. So that's some universities. With our university, we haven't reached a final decision about how we're going to handle this situation. I think that what we may do is still accept students who will need to, in their home country, say anywhere in Indonesia. But there are a couple of complications. So one is we'd prefer to accept students whose work doesn't depend as much on traveling. So for example, there's some research that really you can undertake anywhere. You know, it might be conducting surveys online. It doesn't really matter where you are. And I think that research you can start anywhere. What we're concerned about is there are people who are conducting research where they really need to be in a particular place. So for example, a lot of researchers in our university like to study some of the Aboriginal communities nearby. But we really don't know when that might be possible. And so we're a little bit more reluctant to accept a student then. So that's one issue. So we would prefer to accept candidates in their nation, like, and allow them to study online, if it's a topic where you can, to some degree, begin and even make progress in any country, where it doesn't really matter where you are. The second issue is that there may be scholarship conditions too. So depending on which scholarship you've provided may affect whether you can start or not. So for example, at this time, if you get the main scholarship that universities offer called RTP, that scholarship has to be paid into an Australian bank account. And you can only open an Australian bank account in Australia. So that can make it a little bit difficult for people who have never been to Australia, don't have an Australian bank account, but want to study from Indonesia. So there might be some limitations, and it's something we'll probably need to revisit every month. So I actually don't have a final answer to that question. It's really going to be changing every few weeks or so. And I'm happy to sort of provide more information as more information comes to hand.
Yeah, from my side, it's COVID-19 really affect us international students, especially if we have a very short time frame, or those international students who really depend on part-time job for life. COVID-19 affects us a lot, especially if you can't go out, do some part-time job or something like that, or students who depend really on access to lab-based work, for like chemistry students or other students who depend really on lab-based work, or some students that require traveling for collection of data. And yeah, COVID-19 affects us a lot. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Pak Fidel. We have a question as well from Awad, which is quite similar, but I just want to make sure that I heard that the some point covered, but I'd like to explore more on the second questions. During this COVID-19 pandemic, each country might have different regulation that might change for each country. Does this change affect those who would like to study abroad? I think you did answer the question the first in your previous question, but I think this is the second important part. What is the most challenge that international face during this pandemic? I'd like to hear the opinion from Pak Fidel as a student and also Dr. Moss as the supervisor.
So yeah, so of course, with the current situation, those who are going to start your study, you can't travel because the border is not opened yet. So you can't start your study. And for those who are some of the students are being trapped in China. Some of my friends are being trapped in China and can continue their study. And some of us who has to seek for the extension of the scholarship, or even if you can't get an extension of the scholarship, then you have to ask for the like the waiver of your tuition fee or something like that. Or some of you who don't have access to lab to complete your laboratory experiment, for example, you have to ask for an extension. Yeah, kind of.
Okay, thank you, Pak Fidel. What about you, your opinion?
Yeah, look, it is a challenge. And I can only really comment about Australia at this stage, but I mean, one challenge is that although many international students in Australia are on a scholarship of some type. Sometimes, as Fidel said, that scholarship could run out, or sometimes the scholarship is not enough to live on if you have a family and you need to support children, for example. And in those situations, of course, you know, the student will often need to work. And the problem, of course, is at the moment it's very hard to find jobs in these circumstances. And at the moment, Australia is not really providing very good welfare support for international students. So there is good welfare support for domestic students and for anyone living in Australia. But there isn't great welfare for international students. It's been a bit of an issue. That's if you're living in Australia. So there are some students living in Australia who are struggling, and I don't think there's enough support for them at this stage. And you know, and if you're actually living in your home country, then that's different. And then the issue is really more about if you're, you know, accessing money and accessing the resources you might need in other countries. But normally, you know, the universities are quite good at providing all the information you need, like such as the training and development online. They're coping quite well with that. So it's not too much of a problem.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Moss and Pak Fidel. I have a question actually for Pak Fidel because I'm interested in his presentation about emotional stage. How do you cope with the emotional stage when you are in a period you don't feel motivated to work and you feel like you want to quit?
Yeah, I was there's a lot of things that you can do to keep yourself motivated. Well, you can talk to someone who can cheer you up, or you can get together with your friends. And for me, I always play sport once a week, because once I play sport, I forget about everything. I forgot about all the millions failed experiment in the lab. I always play sport on weekends, so I can start the following week with fresh mind. Yeah, that kind of things that I do when I face challenge. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Pak Fidel. Maybe Dr. Moss, you have any strategy as a supervisor to advise for us, or for me particularly, if in the future I'm going to apply for a PhD and I found the same problem?
Well, it's hard to know where to start. I should say, I mentioned we have a website I showed you before of information for candidates. There's a particular link to a whole series of strategies on how to promote resilience and so forth. So rather than answer the question, which I probably should do, I might just point you to the website where there's, you know, lots of interesting insights. And then specifically we've designed insights that are not obvious. There's a lot of obvious things that people try to do in response to challenges, but we've identified all the research that shows insights about how to improve things like resilience that are not obvious, that actually sound a little bit unusual, but tend to be effective. So just as one example, you know, it's been interesting to find out that actually if people have a particular routine every morning, they tend to become more resilient with the challenges of, say, COVID. And the routine is that people should, according to some research, spend about 10 minutes every morning reading very quickly, you know, new ideas, like about new concepts, 10 minutes of some sort of exercise, and 10 minutes completing something that they've been avoiding, something they've been procrastinating on. You know, if you haven't, you know, cleaned your house for a while, you should clean your house, or whatever it might be. And half an hour of that every morning has been shown to increase people's capacity to sort of maintain energy and resilience across the day.
Okay, so that's very interesting. So once you always start fresh in the morning and try to break your procrastination, and doing sport is something like, or maybe you can do something that we like, maybe playing music, musical instrument, or hanging out with friends. I think would be very beneficial.
No, definitely. But the three things I mentioned, they all have to be something that's a bit hard. that takes effort. Because the idea is that when you do something that's a bit hard, that takes a bit of effort and concentration in the morning, that tends to improve your concentration for the rest of the day. So you're definitely right that speaking to other people, maintaining social skills, playing music is very important, but maybe not for the first half hour of the day. Maybe leave that to a little bit later.
Yeah. So maximize your first half hour in the morning. Right. We still have question from Dr. Maria. Are there any possibilities to have tuition fee reduced or cut for international students if the program is run online? For example, for CDU, especially for CDU.
That's right. So we can offer tuition waivers. So what can happen is someone might apply for a PhD, but not receive a scholarship. They might not quite have enough research or publications or whatever to receive a scholarship, but they can still apply for a fee waiver. And we can provide fee waivers. So we waive the fee, that is, you don't have to pay a fee, provided the research proposal or the research interest is in line with our priorities. So if your research is in line with what's important to CDU, and for CDU that's more around, there's many areas, but it's often health research, environment research, engineering, IT, various parts of business and education in particular, then if your project aligns to those priorities, then we can offer and often offer a fee waiver. So you can just apply as usual and then ask for a fee waiver, and that may be considered, particularly in these circumstances, but maybe in the future as well.
From my side, I was supposed to finish in May this year because I ran out of my 4th year, but because I depend really on lab-based work, which I can't finish because of COVID. So I need to ask for a 6 months extension to be able to complete my lab work. And in that case, I asked for free tuition fee from the university. And I was lucky that the university gave me a free tuition fee for 1 semester. So I just got an extension of the scholarship from my government, from Indonesia. Yeah, I got free tuition fee from University of Melbourne for 6 months.
I was wondering, Pak Fidel, how fast the Indonesian scholarship provider respond to the situation and contacting you when the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic start?
They did really well. They responded super quickly. Like they provided us with like a book of guidance just right at the time COVID struck. So for those of us at the end of our study and can't finish because of COVID, so for example, because of campus closure or something, so they provided us with point per point that we can consider to apply for an extension if we meet the requirement. Yeah.
Wow.
They responded super quickly. Yeah.
Wow, it's really great, Pak Fidel. It's great to hear that you can survive, and also you can still continue your work and research even this very hard situation. Yeah. I don't think we have more questions. If I'm still waiting, if we have more questions in the chat room, and I'm checking the chat room at the moment. If the participant in here have more questions, then please drop the question, because I think we have only 2 minutes left, and I'm going to end this Q&A session. It's supposed to be 20 minutes, but we have so many interesting questions, and this looks like very interesting topic, because the challenges is because of the outbreak of the COVID-19, then everything changes and how you react to the situation. And Pak Fidel have, and Dr. Simon also have given us the insight and also advice. Okay, the participant, if you have more questions, and I'm still waiting. I actually have more question for Pak Fidel. How do you find with the application process? How rigid do you think, and how do you cope with that?
Do you mean the application for extension or application for?
Yes. For the extension
of
yes, for the
scholarship?
extension. Yes, for the extension of the scholarship.
They have the rule for the deadline for the submission because Indonesian Endowment Fund for Education have thousands of students studying around the world, and there are students who finish this year and this month, next month, or something like that. So they have a rule that we have to submit application for extension at least before 5 or 10 before week 1 or week 2 in each month, and then they will release the outcome at the end of the month, or if I'm not mistaken, at the beginning of the following month. So it was quick. Yeah.
Wow, that's very interesting, because even though it's the benefit of studying abroad, even though we have a problem and situation that we are unable to handle or cope with, then the system and then also the teamwork helps helps us to go out from the situation and then respond very, very quickly. Right, I think we don't have any more question. I'm trying to check in a chat room, but oh, okay, we have one last question. So this is one last one for Pak Fidel, and it's coming from Karina Handayani. How long did it take to you to prepare for your PhD application?
I didn't quite remember enough, but it takes me 2 to 3 months probably. But I came back to the same supervisors, so there are some requirements that I don't need to fulfill. For example, and I came back to the same university, so within 2 years when I finish, so I don't have to provide them with IELTS score, and I don't have to provide them with the letter from the supervisors because my supervisor is here. I came back to the same supervisor, so I have, it takes me 2 to 3 months probably. Yeah.
Wow, thank you. I think for the participants in here who wants to apply for PhD, you may take this advice and then start or kick it off. And maybe by the end of the year, maybe you can have something to start it with. All right, I think I have to close this question and answer session. I'd like to thank everyone for giving your questions. But I'd like to give a bit summary of today's talk from Dr. Simon, that you mentioned about the eligibility, and also you have the most important thing about your research is you have to think of a problem to solve. Then by thinking of the problem, then it can lead to the creativity, and it can lead to interesting project and originality of the idea. And don't forget to do online research, collect the research, read it a lot, and finding your institution and supervisor that are relevant to you or similar to your area. That's very, very important. But most important thing is you also mentioned about the past supervisor characteristics, and also you also mentioned about the drawbacks and benefit of deciding or choosing the institution. Don't forget to think also or consider also about the university that has a beautiful natural atmosphere that may help you when you conduct your PhD later. Most important thing as well is you have to trust your intuition. When you choose your university, when you choose your area, you need to trust your, and also you need to trust your intuition to choose your supervisor. For the next step, what you have to do, you have to prepare rigid document so to make you and also thorough document and complete one so that you can pass the selection. And that's been mentioned by Pak Fidel as well. And you have to carefully consider in your application process, you have to carefully consider about your supervisor, because it can be quite challenging in the future. When you prepare your application, then Pak Fidel also mentioned to think about the idea or the area that really drives your motivation and your passion and your interest. You are not aiming for PhD to be to win a Nobel Prize. You're not gonna solve the world, as you're not gonna save the world as well. So don't think too much about that, but just working in your passion and also interest. And don't forget to, if you work hard in your lab or in your PhD work, don't forget to play hard as well. You're going out, you build up your social skill, but also when you have to remember that when you do your PhD, you have to do publication, you have to attend a conference, not because it is not only because it is one of the requirements, but it's very important for your future networking and also research collaboration. But bear in mind that doing a PhD is not a simple thing, because you are going to undergo a certain emotional stages where you have to maintain your mental and also physical health, and you have to have a good supporting system. So you have to work hard, set your target, and then aiming to your PhD goal. So I think that I can summarize from the talk today. I hope I'm getting it right from Dr. Simon and Pak Fidel. Thank you very much. It's very great talk and discussion this afternoon, and I'm very happy you two have given us a lot of insight this afternoon and opening our mind and insight about how a journey to be a PhD students. And before I end this session, I would like to remind once again and for the participant to fill the participation form, because that's really, really important for us to monitor your attendance, and we are going to issue an e-certificate that will be sent to your email address. I'm also gonna announce that the International Relations Office are going to conduct more webinar series in the future. So please check on our social media, the International Relations Office Facebook and also YouTube channel. If you don't subscribe or like or share, then please like, subscribe, and share. And share it to your friends about the beneficial information about scholarship opportunities or research. Before I end the session, we are going to have a photo session in a screenshot mode. So I would like to ask the participant, please turn on your video, but please turn off your audio so it doesn't make any much background noise. So we can do a screenshot and I give a big smile to the camera. Oh, I can see many faces out there. I can see Ibu Jenny. I can see Pak Ganesha. Hi, Pak Odi. Okay, I'll count 1, 2, 3, and everyone please give your best smile. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Smile on the camera, please. Okay, thank you, everyone. So this is the end of the webinar. On behalf of the committee, I would like to thank again Dr. Simon Moss for your time today and your great talk.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Simon.
Thank you. And it's an honor for us to have you here. And also I'd like to thank Pak Fidel. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me in this webinar as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very honored and very proud to thank you. I'm very honored and very proud to see my colleague on screen today sharing such a great information for all of us. And I would like to also thank Charles Darwin University, Ibu Chita and team for your help to facilitate us in this webinar.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Ibu Chita.
Thank you very much. And congratulations for the successful event.
Hi, Mbak.
Thank you. And also would like to thank all the participants who engaged actively during the webinar. I hope to see you faces again in the coming webinar. And I would like to thank Ibu Maria for support the International Relations Staff Office, and special thanks for Ibu Noya, who worked really hard, and Pak Kor, Ibu Dewi, and also Ibu Lia for working really hard behind the scene for making this webinar happen. I apologize for any inconveniences during this webinar, and I hope to see everyone soon again, and hope we can run a future collaboration. So thank you and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Fidel. Thank you.